we are focusing on tonight is, in one sense, a boring topic, because marriage nowadays has become a kind of an issue that different people have different ideas about it, and there is no universal agreement about what marriage is and what a good marriage and a healthy marriage is. There is a very diverse perspective on marriage in our world today. As you know, we are still in the process of defining marriage and developing different legal framework for marriages. And there is a lot of disagreement about them and confusion. So I will not try to address the reasons for this state of affairs. I may refer briefly to them, but in general, I will focus on the Baha'i perspective on marriage. And as you will see, the Baha'i perspective on marriage, in one sense, is very ancient and traditional, and in another sense is very modern and revolutionary. In the Baha'i faith, it is stated that the marriage institution and the law of marriage is an ancient and ever-present spiritual law that has existed from the very beginning of the organization of human society and will continue to exist forever. And in the Baha'i faith, the notion of marriage is the coming together of a man and woman to create the institution of marriage. All other types of union don't fall under the definition of Baha'i marriage. So, let us reflect for a moment on the state of being human. As we come to this world, at the beginning of our lives, we are connected with our parents and caregivers. At the beginning, we have a symbiotic relationship with, of course, our mothers, and then we develop a very, very intimate and symbiotic relationship with our fathers and siblings, if the circumstances of marriage are such that allow close relationship. And during childhood years, we develop further types of relationship with friends and classmates and community, in the community that we live, and so forth. But as we grow and enter the age of adolescence, we begin to search for a companion. we begin to search for someone that somehow will complete us. We do not feel totally complete in isolation. We need connections. We need relationships. Relationships are the ever-present aspect of human life. We are constantly preoccupied with relationship, and we constantly try to establish new relationships, to establish deeper relationships, to establish more meaningful relationships. Relationships are fundamental. And of course, at the core of these relationships, at the essence of relationships, from a spiritual perspective, is that humanity is constantly moving towards the ultimate object of our love and quest, which is God, which we really don't understand it, but at the same time we have this quest and this yearning and this wanting to be closer and closer. And all other relationships are reflections of that mystical quest in human heart. It is a kind of a phenomenon that the mystic poet of Iran, Maulana Rumi, has described beautifully. He says, this is about love and our search, our quest for our beloved. We are always looking for our beloved, okay? So he said, first, when I was apart from you, this world did not exist, nor any other. First, when I was apart from you, this world did not exist, nor any other. Second, whatever I was looking for was always you. Third, why did I ever learn to count to 3? Okay? In other words, the fundamental issue is the quest that we have. We are constantly in search and quest. And when we come, before that, therefore, the world doesn't have all that meaning that it should. And then when we are connected, then this is the world. And then there is nothing beyond that, you see. Interestingly enough, that Rumi goes on to say fourth, fifth. There are other issues involved in love. But this encapsulates this search, this yearning of human soul, of human heart, for connections, for relationships, for getting connected with the beloved. And in human relationships, this particularly is expressed in our relationship with our beloved in the context of marriage. So this is the first level, the first stage, a stage of search and looking and finding. And when we find our beloved, we enter the valley of love, which is the romantic phase. And romantic phase is romantic, is nice. And it is extremely dangerous phase. Because in the romantic phase, you see in the beloved everything that you have imagined that should be in a relationship. You know, we have imagination. Say, when I find the perfect one would be this way, that way, that way, that way. Okay? And then we come across somebody and say, that's it. That's the person. Okay. And then we superimpose all our ideas, hopes, aspirations on that person. That person becomes the embodiment of our dreams. Okay? In other words, we see in that person whatever we want to see. Not whatever is there, whatever we want to see. That's the reason that it is said that this phase is the blind phase of marriage. Well, relationship, okay, marriage relationship is a blind phase. Is the phase that you don't see things in a clear way. And it's going to take time and objectivity and objective input from others to help us to make sense of this very exciting phase. But it's very romantic. I give you a little story about how these romantic phases are. Many years ago, in 1961 to be exact, I had graduated from medical school, and we decided, we meaning myself and a number of young Baha'is in the city of Isfahan in Iran, decided to make a visit to a tribal community which was about several hundred kilometers from Isfahan in Boy Rahmat tribe. The reason that we want to do that was that we knew that there have been Baha'is in the Boy Rahmat tribe, but then in the 1950s there was a systematic attack on the Baha'i faith, very similar to what is happening right now, but much less problematic and much shorter than it is now. But nevertheless, it was a very, very difficult time, and a number of Baha'is were killed. And all Baha'i institutions were outlawed, and all Baha'i institutions, centers were taken over. And during that time, the relationship between the Boy Rahmat Baha'is and the Baha'i centers in Isfahan and in other parts were interrupted. So there was no connection. We hadn't heard from the Baha'is in the Boy Rahmat and specifically the small city settlement of Qatar. We haven't heard from them for several years. So we, being young and enthusiastic, we decided that we wanted to go and visit them. And so we organized a group. And the senior person in the group was Mr. Khanjani, who is now one of the 7 Baha'is, Yaran, in Iran, in prison, who is now, has been in prison for several years. Khanjani was a very, very good friend of our family and myself, and a number of years older than myself. And he and a number of us, 4 or 5 of us, decided to go to Boy Rahmat for a visit. It's a long story. I just mentioned just a very, very small part of it. It was a long journey. It took 12 hours to go 300 kilometers because it was mountainous and the roads were not roads. And finally we arrived. And it happened that our car was the first car ever had gone that far into the heart of the tribe. So people were wondering what was this animal coming towards them. And I remember it was in the evening, just at the sunset time, and people were cooking in open ovens. They would collect wood from the hills and make their food on open ovens, and there were fires here and there and there. And as usual, women were cooking and men were playing. And the men were playing a game which is very similar to baseball, actually. They had a ball and they had a bat. They had the different rules, but it was similar to that notion. And we arrived and we stopped. As we were arriving, the whole group, several hundred of them, got together because they were wondering what this was all about. And we stopped and we got out of our car and we had one name. Okay. We said that we have come here to visit Mr. Mir Eshqullah. Mir Eshqullah, Mir means, the leader, and, like Khan and Mir and so forth. Eshqullah means love of God. That's a good name, okay? We said, we have come to see Mir Eshqullah. Mir Eshqullah, we knew, was secretary of the Spiritual Assembly of Baha'is of Qatar many years earlier. And here emerged this absolutely handsome, tall man, and he said, I'm Mir Eshqullah. And we as Baha'is, when we see each other, we say Allahu Akbar, greetings. So we said Allahu Akbar, and the whole group said Allahu Akbar. And they were all Baha'is. And we came and kissed and hugged and cried and did all kind of crazy things that you do when you're in love. We were delighted and we saw each other. And so we said that we have come and we are going to be here for a few days, and we have a physician with us, we have medication because we knew that they didn't have doctors, we have other things and so forth. So we organized 3 different areas of activities. One was medical clinic, and the other one was the education of children and the whole education aspect of the community. And the third one was informing them about the faith and what is happening with the faith and those kind of things, administrative. So there were the 3 areas of activity. So I started seeing patients and so forth. But anyway, on the second night, around 2 o'clock in the morning, I was, somebody called at the door. I was awake because living in being there and sleeping in the facilities that they gave us, you're not alone. You have all kind of little entities that are there also, all kind of things. They keep you awake all night. So I was delighted to be woke, with somebody calling, and they said, there are 2 people who want to see you. I said, all right. 2 o'clock in the morning, they say, yeah, this is urgent. I said, all right. So I got up and went in the other room. And there was one young man, around 19, 20, and young woman around the same age. They said, they said their story in the following way, that the young man was a shepherd. And every day he would take the cattle to the hill. And the young lady had the responsibility to collect woods for fire. And she would go in the other hill every day. He was from a Baha'i family, and she was from a Muslim family. And they said that we have fallen in love. Okay? And we communicate with each other when we are on the hills by singing. The one sings and the other one sings, and they go back and forth, broken hearts singing, I wish I had the voice to sing it for you, but I can't. Okay. So they said that we had wanted to marry, but we need the consent of our parents, because in the Baha'i marriage, you need the consent. And the young girl said that my mother, and my parents, especially my mother, is concerned about whether we should, I should marry a Baha'i. And however, yesterday, my mother came as one of the patients. I had seen 200 people, okay? She had come as a patient to you, and she told me that if the doctor says it's okay, then it's okay. This is a good doctor. If he says it's okay, it's okay. So we have come here to ask you to tell my mother that it's okay. So what you do, under those circumstances? So I said, okay, tell your mother to come to see me tomorrow. And she came and we talked. And, they were from, decent people. And the other side, I did a little bit of investigation. They were decent. And finally, the doctor said yes. So, now, isn't that romantic just imagine that kind of a connection that would take place and the way people fall in love. They knew hardly anything about each other other than seeing each other occasionally in the tribe and singing back and forth. But this is the working of the human heart. This is the way we search, and then we somehow connect with another soul, with another person. And that's the reason that in the choosing of a mate is a combination of chance and choice. We, by chance, come across somebody. We, by chance, come across many people. And then among these chances, we make a choice. See? And the choice that we make is because there are points of attraction that bring us together. But that is the beginning of a relationship. And then the relationship need to be nurtured and need to be developed and need to be understood. And that's where the role of community and the family and the friends and everybody comes in to help you to understand. And that's why in the context of the Baha'i faith, we see that, for example, Abdul Baha says that before choosing your future partner, the parents shouldn't interfere. You should have total freedom to go through the process of establishing relationships, getting to know people, and to see who would be most appropriate person for you to establish a bond that is conducive to unity. That's the fundamental issue, that you have to, when you look for somebody, you have to make sure that this person that you want to establish a relationship would be able to establish a relationship with you on the foundation of unity for a long period of time, okay, to whole life. And that means that we have to understand the concept of unity and the whole thing, which, of course, we wouldn't go about it tonight, but it is a prerequisite, is that, yes, I can establish a position of unity with this person, okay? Now, in the context of the Baha'i principles, you have to establish that relationship, that and evaluate that relationship and its capacity to create unity, while avoiding getting sexually intimate. Now that's a very difficult thing, because most people find it difficult to deal with their passions. And not only that, they think that actually it is essential to get to know the other person, not only socially and mentally and psychologically, but also physically, to make sure that, your physical union would be happy and so forth. That's why in modern era, the whole notion of establishing intimate relationships before marriage and living together before marriage became so popular, you see. When the foundations of marriage became weaker and weaker, and family became weaker in Western societies, what happened was that people said, okay, we are going to experiment, because most young people would look at the marriages of their parents and they would find them not satisfactory. They would say, I don't want to have a marriage like that. I want to have a better marriage. So they decided that, okay, the parents, got married according to the old standards. Therefore, they would get married. They would prepare for marriage by experimenting and living together and to see what it is. So this became the norm, and it has been the norm for a number of years. And now there is increasing evidence that people who have lived together and then they have got married, the chances of marriage breakdown in them is much greater than those that haven't. I have documented some of those research in this one of these chapters of this book. And that's very interesting that they found that those who have lived longer together before marriage, then once they get married, the chances of them separating faster is greater. Something happens here that requires attention on our part to understand what is the dynamics of development of marriage. You see, marriage is a living entity, a living social entity. And because it is a living social entity, it has a life of its own, and it has different stages of life, you see. Think of marriage as having 3 stages. The stage 1 is the romantic phase, and people being wise decided that romantic phase would last at the most for 30 days. They called it honeymoon. Okay. Yeah, the romantic phase doesn't last long, because as soon as you get married and you come together, everything changes. Before marriage, the couples sit together and talk until 2 o'clock in the morning, and they say, yes, you are right, yes, you are right, I fully agree. They are in harmony with each other, they have nice talks with each other, and they put the best of themselves forward, and they are always wrapped very nicely and packaged very nicely, and this is before marriage, okay? when they get married, is as though they have been in a trick box. You know what's a trick box? That a box that is nicely wrapped, and you open it and something jumps out. Surprise! When people get married, suddenly a surprise comes in. The partner, usually the gentleman, doesn't want to talk anymore. There's nothing to talk about. And they divide the areas of responsibility. You do this and that and that, and I do this and that and that. I remember one time a couple came to me after 2 weeks of marriage, and they were in desperate situation. And I said, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" They said, "Well, we made a mistake." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, the wife said, I thought that when we get married, he's going to do what I want him to do. If I said, please do this or do that, he would do it because he loves me. And now he comes home and sits there and picks up the television, TV news and looks to, which program and goes and start watching television. And I have to cook. And then he doesn't even say thank you for what I, cook and so forth. And then he says, well, my mother always cooked much nicer, which was the end of the relationship when the gentleman, and people suddenly relax in the relationship. Before marriage, they put their best forward. And once they get married, they think that the other person should love them for their worst qualities rather than their best qualities. So they relax. Everything becomes very routine. And the respect for the others disappear. And then something else happens. They begin to discover habits in the other person that are really upsetting. The way that the person chooses his food, the other person that they use, for example, toothbrush and toothpaste and all habits in the bed and in the bathroom and here and there. And the couple begin to gradually go apart from each other because they begin to see that there is a lot of adaptation they have to make, a lot of change they have to make, a lot of consideration for the other person they have to make. And they go further and further away. If the first phase of marriage is like childhood of marriage and is romantic, the second phase of marriage is like adolescence of marriage. And there is a lot of argument, a lot of fighting, a lot of going back and forth. It becomes intense, it becomes problematic, and many times the couple in this phase decide that their love is dying and they are falling out of love. And when that happens, then of course they begin to pay attention to new things, to new relationships. They begin to imagine how nice it was when they were in romantic phase. They would then want to begin new relationships. And there is a danger of falling in love with other things like your job or your baby or friends or something, or falling in love with somebody else and repeating the romantic phase again. And majority of marriages that break up, they break up in this phase, the second phase of the marriage. While if they knew that the marriage has 3 phases, and they would be able to stay in this process of development and an evolution of the marriage and help the marriage to evolve, they would enter eventually in the 3rd phase, which is a new romantic phase. While the first phase of romantic relationship was a blind phase, this becomes enlightened phase. This becomes the phase that the individual loves the other person because he or she have become to know the other person and they know qualities of the other person and know the beautiful person that the other individual is. And they begin to fall in love with many things that they never had seen before, they never had considered before. In other words, the appreciation of the beauty of the other person goes from the surface deeper and deeper and deeper to the core of the other person. This is the process that an enlightened love relationship begins. But this process requires both personal development and relational development. Both of them have to take place. The individuals have to both personally evolve and develop and also in the relationship with each other and learn new types of relationship, new ways of relationship, new ways of creating unity and so forth. Now, at the core of this process, what would make a marriage successful is to replace power with love. You see, throughout history until now and still now, the love relationship in marriages have been mixed with power. Of who has more control, who has more power in the relationship, who has more say-so in the relationship, who has more money in the relationship, who contributes more, it has been based on the power. Love has been mixed with the power relationship. And that's why in the history of marriage throughout all cultures, we see so much abuse of power, so much violence in the context of marriage. The context of a marriage, when violence takes place, it means that the level of power relationship has become greater than love relationship. And when that happens, conflict and abuse and violence enters the relationship. And as you know, throughout history, families and marriages have been marked by enormous amount of violence. Usually done in physical terms on the part of men towards women. And women, whenever they could, they would do it in psychological terms towards men because physically they are less powerful, you see. This is complex things. I don't need to go into details of it. But in order for a marriage to have love as the primary force of cohesion rather than power, a fundamental issue is needed that has been absent throughout history of humanity, and that is equality between men and women, gender equality. We haven't had marriages of equal in human history. Equality, gender equality has not taken place on a broad basis in human history. There have been, of course, exceptions, but in general, in all cultures and throughout history, there has not been equality between men and women. Okay? And because there has not been equality between men and women, it is really impossible to create a pure, unadulterated love. Because love requires that equality to be there. Because it is in the context of equality that justice in a relationship takes place. And the fundamental purpose of justice is to create unity. You cannot create unity if there is no equality and justice. And if there is no equality and justice, and you don't have unity, the love relationship becomes problematic. Because unity is an essential requisite for love. And love is an essential requisite for unity. The two are connected with each other. You cannot separate them from each other. So the whole notion of creating marriages that are conducive to unity means that marriages that are equal, are just, and therefore are loving. Okay? In a mature way. Now, both equality and justice and a mature love requires maturity of the individual. We as individuals have to evolve, have to develop, have to mature. And right now, many families in many cultures, parents raise their children in such a way that they don't encourage maturation. That's the reason that you see most men stop at level of adolescence. Look at men around the world and how they behave. How they behave in sports and in their drinking of beers and in their pastimes and in this and that. They are all the aggressive juveniles. And women are encouraged to be the opposite of that, being passive children. And they don't allow themselves to, parents don't encourage and don't put the necessary attention to helping children, their boys and their girls, to evolve, to become confident, mature, self-assured, self-knowing individuals who, when they enter the relationship with the other, in the love relationship, they don't need to enter in the love relationship from position of power or position of manipulation or seduction, but rather from position of openness, understanding, harmony, and that creates very, very different types of relationship, you see. So in the Baha'i marriage, we are called upon to create relationships that are constantly helping us to mature, to evolve, to become more capable of equal relationships, more capable of fair and just relationship, more equal, more capable of showing love relationships that are not mixed with conflict and with force and with violence. These are elements of relationship that until now really would not have been possible for majority of people because humanity collectively is evolving, and we are still in adolescent phase of our collective development. And that's why we have had this eruption in solidarity of the marriage, the institution of the marriage, which in the past was kept together through force of religion, force of culture, force of restricted laws and so forth. That was the characteristic of humanity in its collective childhood. And marriages were kept together through force. And so many unhappy marriages were there. People couldn't do anything. People couldn't escape from it. And then we entered our collective age of adolescence, which is, we are in middle of it right now. And the very foundation of marriages became looser and looser and looser and weaker and weaker and weaker. 50% of marriages now are collapsing. And the other 50%, they have different levels of problems and difficulties and so forth. These are the characteristics of age of change and transition that we are in. And it's going to continue like this for a while. And that's why we have to begin to reflect on the marriage in a very different and meaningful way, rather than going with the statistics and with the polls and with the trends that are in our society. So in the Baha'i marriage, the couple are told that, first of all, when you fall in love, that's marvelous, fall in love, but then allow your love to be objectified. In other words, allow yourself time to reflect on the relationship. And the best way that you can test a love relationship by yourself is the level of discipline, self-discipline that is there. Because if two individuals love each other and they say, okay, we will remain friends and we get to know each other and we want to get to know each other and we avoid the intimacy beyond certain level, when you do that, you automatically put yourself in a state of objectivity. And then when you go to your parents, ask for permission, you add a new dimension of objectivity, of how, because right now, people decide to get married and they go, the young man or young woman goes to mother or father and say, I'm in love. And everybody says, oh, my little baby is in love. And then say, I want to get married. And say, oh, that's marvelous. And who you are going to get married to? And going to get married to this person. Say, this person? What do you see in this person? Have you considered this? Have you considered that? Have you seen that? Because when you are in the blind phase of marriage, you don't see that. Love, you don't see those things. You need others to see it for you. And then also, it's fundamental that when the couple get married, to have support. Because marriage, when a couple get married, their first child is their marriage. They have to help this little child, little marriage, to grow. And it's very difficult. Therefore, you need help of other people. You need a united family. You need a united community, a helpful community to help you, to help this little marriage to evolve, to develop. That's why it's so essential to keep the relationship with the parents as intact, as positive, as united as possible. And then the marriage takes place, and in the time of marriage, we make a covenant. Okay? We make a covenant, and the Baha'i marriage covenant is very interesting, Because we say, we all verily abide by the will of God. Okay? Now this is very interesting. This statement, we all verily abide by the will of God, has many dimensions, but I mentioned 2 dimensions of it. One dimension of it is the dimension of will. Okay? The most problematic thing in the context of marriage is the clash of wills. You know, what people fight about is about their will. The people have strong wills and they want this and they want that and they go at each other. So most conflicts in the marriage take place in the context of wills. In the Baha'i marriage, you say we abide by the will of God. In other words, you have to subjugate your will to a higher level of will. That's one level of it. The second aspect of the will of God, is that this life is very unsure, uncertain. You don't know what is going to happen. You don't know whether you're going to have suddenly sickness or an accident or bad luck or you're going to win $5 million. You don't know what's going to happen, okay? You don't know what kind of a child you're going to have. You don't know what kind of the economic situation you're going to encounter, but and on and on and on. And that's why it is important that we enter in the relationship in marriage. We realize that we are getting into an unknown process. And the most important thing that can help you when you're on an unknown journey, when you're traveling through a land that you don't know, is to have somebody beside you that is in harmony with you, rather than is fighting with you. Okay? Imagine you're going on a journey, you don't know anything about it, you're going to a different land, different languages, different events, you don't know what you're going to encounter. Well, which one is better? Is it better to have somebody with you that constantly nags and criticize and give you troubles, or somebody who helps you and is united with you? Which one is better? You just imagine, Okay, so recently there was a statistic, I don't think it was scientific, but nevertheless it sounds good, that said that the greatest cause of divorce is nagging. Okay, people nag at each other until the other say, "Oh, I'm sick and tired of this. I'm goners." Okay, so it is so important that when we enter, embark on this journey, we first of all know that we are in harmony with each other. We are not going to sabotage the journey. And the second thing, that every journey has to have a destination. Otherwise you get lost. Okay? You have to know where you want to go. And in the Baha'i faith, the purpose of marriage is clarified very specifically. We are to create an abode of unity, of peace, of encouragement, of joy, of hospitality, of openness, and an abode that we would bring children into it and help them and raise them to become fruitful, marvelous individuals in society. Okay? In other words, marriage has an objective. Okay? To create a hospitable, a loving home and to bring children to this life. and then educate these children and put them at the service of humanity, you see. So there are certain specific objectives that are prescribed in the Baha'i writings about what marriage should be, what the purpose of marriage should be, why we get into marriage, and so forth. It is not focused on simply having fun. Okay? It's far more than that. It is interesting, you see. One thing that I have learned in life is that any new relationship opens new doors for self-knowledge and self-development. You see? So a person who says, I have decided not to get married, that person can be a marvelous person, can do excellent things for society, praiseworthy things societies, but that person would not have the opportunity to open new areas of his personhood or her personhood, which can become open only with the key of marriage. Okay? Marriage is difficult, but marriage allows you to discover things about you, about yourself, that you never would have been able to discover. Parenting, the same thing. It is amazing what parenting does. It suddenly makes you to discover things about yourself that you never would have imagined to do. And then different kind of children that you will have, you know. In life, for example, you suddenly have a special child, like grandchild, like I have. And this grandchild has opened totally new doors of understanding, of self-knowledge, of opportunity for development for me that I wasn't aware of it. You see? So relationships, the more expanded they are, the more fruitful they are, the more profound they are, the more allow you to discover yourself and to develop self-knowledge. And because there is no end to self-knowledge, there is no end to discovery of oneself, to development of one's reality. There is no end into that. These relationships, however difficult they are ultimately much more positive than negative in their consequence, you see. So these are different issues that when we decide to get married, we should reflect on that and prepare ourselves for this journey. So, one other thing I say and then end it, to make it light, okay, to give you a little bit of hope, okay. Tell you about the way my parents got married, okay. My father grew up in a small village, and his father was a Muslim clergy. But he was a very unusual clergy, the things that he talked on, in the mosque and so forth were so different from everybody and so forth. And my father was very curious about his father. So he would observe him, and he noticed that his father quite often would have visitors around 12 midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning when everybody was supposed to be asleep. And they would go to this third floor room that was the sanctuary of the father, and nobody went there. And my father got very curious about his father. Why? What is he doing? This man coming and 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. So he went and through keyhole looked to see what's going on. He saw that his father and a couple of other persons, men, would open a book and read it and quietly talk about it together, and then close the book, put it in a box, lock it, and then quietly come out and go. And he observed it a few times, and sure enough, that was every time. That's what they did. So my father decided that he is going to unlock the box and to see what that book was. And he goes and he does that, and it was one of the most remarkable books in the Baha'i scriptures, the Book of Certitude. And he began to read the Book of Certitude, and he talked with his father, and his father said that he actually has become Baha'i. And my father was the second of the 7 siblings, soon became Baha'i. And then soon after that, his father had an accident and died. So my father left his village and went somewhere else. And he had limited education. My father had elementary education, but otherwise he's educated himself. And in this new town, my father had a job, and his job was tax collection. And the tax collectors in Iran at that time were the most feared and the most hated persons. Okay, people were afraid of them because they would go and get money, and they hated them because of the same reason. But my father had become famous as an honest and kind tax collector, which was very abnormal. So he therefore was respected by people. And in this town, there were a number of Baha'is, and he would go to the Baha'i feast and so forth. And he had seen some young ladies in the Baha'i thing, belonging to a family, a Sadr family, and he decided that he would marry one of those young ladies. So he didn't have a family in town, so he went to a matchmaker. He went to a matchmaker and said, I've decided to get married. He said, okay. Who do you want? I want to marry the Sadr's daughter. He said, okay, I go and find out and come back. So a few days later, he came back and said, good news, they have accepted. I said, all right. So my father went and put his very nice suit on and his best suit on, and he and the matchmaker together start walking towards the bride-to-be house for marriage. And my father noticed that they were going in different direction. He said, where are we going? He said, well, we are going to Sadrul Ulama. He said, what? He said, yes. You see, it happened in that city, that town. There were two sad families. One was Sadr the Baha'i, and the other one was the most distinguished family in town called Sadrul Ulama, but people would call him Sadr. Okay? Sadrul Ulama was the most distinguished family and had a brother who actually was totally against Baha'is and had ordered martyrdom of a number of Baha'is in that town. Okay? So it was that kind of a family. But Sadrul Ulama was a good guy. He said, what? He said, yeah. I went to Sadrul Ulama and told them. And Sadr said, yes, he is honest. And he is also Sayyid, because my family come from family of Prophet Muhammad. They are called Sayyid. So he is good. And it's okay to get married. They said, but what about the fact that there is a rumor that he's a Baha'i? He said, it doesn't matter. The fact that he's honest and he's Sayyid, that's the best thing. You know? So my father said, well, what am I going to do, Am I going to go and marry, the daughter of Sadrul Ulama? Or if I don't, this end of my life in this town, if I stay alive. If I do, who am I getting married? That's it. So he decided that is the will of God. He said, okay, let's go. Continue. So they went. They went and they got married. My mother moved in, and my mother came from very aristocratic background. My father was ordinary. So she had, she never had cooked or anything, and she had maids and. So they got married, and soon after, about a year later, I came to this world, and my mother and father had good relationship and very nice relationships, and had another child. And then my mother became aware of a peculiar habit on the part of my father. She became aware that approximately every 3 weeks, my father would come home late. Okay? Every 3 weeks. And being in Iran and being in a Muslim environment, she thought that, okay, he has another wife. That was normal, okay? That was normal in society. Another wife. So she decided that she's going to watch him to see what's going on. And she noticed that every time that he came late, he would come quietly. He had a book with him. And he would go and put a book in a box and lock it. Can you imagine? And it would, on and on, this would happen. So she decided she's going to go and break the box. Now, my mother, when she was 11 years old, had a dream. She was sleeping in her bedroom. The bedroom had 2 doors. And she dreamt that this absolutely magnificent figure came to her room from one door, looked at her, smiled at her, and went out the other door. Nothing else. And she had never forgotten that dream. It had had profound impact on her. So when she went and broke the lock and opened and saw a book, and the book was Book of Certitude, the same book, and opened it, and there was a photo. And the photo was exactly the photo that she had seen in dream. And that was Abdul Baha. Yes. Yeah. And she suddenly wanted, what is this? So she confronted my father, and my father said that, of course, he was a Baha'i. And she said, I knew something about it, but I wasn't interested. I thought that it's better not to mention it, and but what is this and that? And then she became a Baha'i. And they lived together all their lives until my father died in a car accident, and then she continued. And here were two individuals who didn't know each other at all, who were brought together by chance, who established a truly loving relationship with each other, and united relationship. They had 7 children. They went through all kind of experiences in life. One of their children, my third brother, died at the age of 26 after he just finished his PhD and was at the height of his accomplishment and developed cancer and died. But they were able to tolerate all of these, to go through the process and so forth. So the point that I'm trying to make is that marriage is the workshop of human development, is a place that allows us to evolve, to develop, to grow, to become bigger and greater and more mature and more refined and more enlightened. Marriage is, from a Baha'i perspective, is totally different from the current concepts of what marriage is. Okay? And it is in that context of the Baha'i marriage within these parameters that we discover our many hidden qualities, and we gradually can accomplish some, if not most, of our purpose for our life. Okay, dear friend, thank you.